Joining us live now is Simon Jackman, CEO of the US Study Centre. Simon, as we just heard there, Foreign Minister Ms Cheney is in Washington, D.C. Australia and the US, well, they're both calling for an end of escalating violence that we're seeing in Gaza and Israel. Will this united front help this situation?
I think, look, it's while an expression from Australia is obviously welcome and appropriate, the real big actor here is the United States. The historical and ongoing leverage it has with respect to, certainly with respect to Israel and to a lesser extent the Palestinians as well. They're the single biggest player. I think the interesting thing from an Australian viewpoint is the diffusion of strategic focus for the United States. If Australia had its way, it'd be all Indo-Pacific all the time. And one of the issues we see from an Australian perspective is the US as the global superpower, its focus being dragged back to the Middle East when, from an Australian perspective, mission number one has to be the Indo-Pacific matters much closer to home than the Middle East. So I think that's the way to think about the way this issue is dominating that press conference today in Washington.
And how will Ms Cheney's visit to Washington, D.C. strengthen our relationship with America?
Oh, look, the Foreign Minister was in town. That was the conclusion of a very full 2.5 days in Washington. Most of her time, as I understand it, was spent up on Capitol Hill with an extremely full program. Dealing with, again, we focus down at the White House and the executive branch, but the money comes out of Congress and the numbers in Congress are extremely tight. There could well be a change of from Democratic to Republican control in 2022. Having great relationships with both sides of US politics up on Capitol Hill is so important. I think the Australian diplomatic mission gets that perhaps better than some other diplomatic missions in Washington. So spending time up there is a must-do item for any Australian foreign minister or defence minister when they're in town. And Ms Cheney did that and then some. Based on the social media, we were getting photos of the many, many meetings she took up there. And repeatedly, those committees, you know, that's where the real backbone, or one of the real backbones of strength for the Australian alliance, Australia's alliance with the US vests, is up there in Capitol Hill, because we're up there all the time reminding them of the importance of Australia as an ally of the United States and the dollars that need to come in behind that to sustain the United States' presence this far away from the American homeland. And so really, really productive visit, as best as I can tell, just based on who she was meeting and some of the readouts we were getting about the topics. COVID and mixing it up with China on vaccine diplomacy, sort of a really important topic that came up in many of those meetings based on what we're hearing about what went down in those meetings.
Good to hear it was a productive meeting, productive few days. I want to ask you about something that's going on in the US, in the government there. The Republicans have ousted a top lawmaker, Liz Cheney, over her criticism of Donald Trump. Does this show that he still has more power over the Republican Party than ever?
Yes and no. The yes is that what I think you're seeing is sort of an effort to consolidate the Republican Party. What's going to be their strategy for those 2022 elections I just discussed? I think the Republicans are thinking of this. This is going to be a base election. Democratic turnout will not be as high as it was when the presidency was at stake. And voices that are splitting the Republican Party at the moment need to be silenced, frankly. I think it's very much as much as brutal as the politics of it are, a silencing of the number 3 Republican in Congress, and someone with the name Cheney, Republican Party royalty from the reddest of red states, Wyoming. This is about getting their ducks in a row. Everybody's singing from the same playbook to mobilize the Republican base that I think they are counting on to outnumber the Democrats who will vote in those midterm elections, and that being their ticket back to winning control of the House of Representatives and the Senate. They did it in '94 with Newt Gingrich at Contract for America. They did it in 2010 at Obama's first midterm election. And I think they are looking at those historical examples of a party that's tacking a little bit to its extreme, but it's really unified and counting on the support and the passionate support of where the energy in the party is. And that's the yes part of the answer. And that is still with Donald Trump and the fact that he was robbed being a big narrative that's going to get people out and voting in 2022. Cheney was not running that narrative. She was running a different narrative, that we needed to move on, that Trump was perpetuating a great lie that was damaging to the US Constitution. And irrespective of your private beliefs about that, and I'm sure many Republican members of Congress actually believe that to be the case, all these things are about the politics. And I think the politics of this right now are pointing Republicans towards, we're going with that line because that's where the energy in our party is. And we need to silence voices to the contrary. A unified party organized around that message, or at least tapping into the energy in that part of the party, is what's going to get us back into power in 2022.
It's fascinating. We'll have to see how this pans out for them. Simon Jackman, we have to leave it there. Thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.